Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Pulled into Nazareth, was a feeling about half past dead. Just need some place where I can lay my head. Hey mister, can you tell me where a man might find a bed? He just grinned and shook my hand, no was all he said. Take a load off Annie, take a load for free. Take a load off Annie, and
Put
the load right on me.
First of all, I feel like I pulled into Nazareth is like a really great first line.
Yeah, it is.
It makes me think of slouching toward Bethlehem, but like the positive version. Like slouching toward Bethlehem, pulling in Nazareth.
Yeah.
This verse, like what this verse is about, is like pretty straightforward compared to, I think, later verses in this song.
Yeah. Well, are we taking it verse by verse?
You can talk overall about the song, but I mean,
because the song itself kind of is all over the place.
Yeah.
This is why I kind of think that The Wait is either the best song ever written or the worst song ever written. I
think of like each verse as like its own little sketch.
Well, and I think that that's a good way to do it because they seemingly have nothing. There's no real relation.
Yeah.
To each one.
I mean, the first verse and the second verse are connected in this mechanical way, like a Mr. Show sketch.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. That is a good way to put it. They all kind of seem like random anecdotes of a vagabond.
Yeah. And so this is interesting too, because this first verse, when it's sung by the band, is it Levon Helm who sings it?
Yes.
Okay. So when it's sung by them, this first verse, this whole idea of this person is looking for somewhere to stay, and this other guy, obviously it's Nazareth. There's no rooms.
Yeah.
Nowhere to stay.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's played like a joke.
Yes, it is.
But I remember growing up, our dad used to always sing this song, and I felt like he always added so much more like sadness to this idea that there was nowhere to stay.
Right.
And it was like way more melancholy as performed by our father than it is as performed by Levon Helm.
I think that this line can be sang many different ways because at a base level, it is a joke, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a joke about Jesus, right? But, I've never thought of it that way, like ever. I've never considered the fact that it's like, I mean, I got the reference, but I never considered it, I never thought about it in like a funny way.
Yeah.
Probably because of Dad.
Right.
Interesting.
People tell me a lot that they value my creativity. I hear it both personally and professionally. And obviously, it's a really nice thing to hear. But I'll be honest, when people say that to me in a professional context, I don't really know what they mean. I don't know what is valuable, materially or monetarily, about my brain. Not much, if we're to consider the actual financial evidence. And I've never really cared about that. I've occasionally made a little pocket change through this podcast or videos or one-off creative gigs over the years, but overall, this is a money-losing enterprise. And that's kind of by design, I have the luxury of not having to think about how my creative passions could best be monetized. I've got a day job, and I like it, and I do this on my own. But the calculus changes when you start trying to make the world a better place. I've started thinking about the things I do best and thinking about how to bring them to bear on the issues affecting my community. And it's starting to become clearer to me what is capital V valuable about creativity. As usual, it's 50% likely that some of you listening really need to hear this, and it's also 50% possible that I'm only just now realizing something that everybody else in the world has always understood forever. What happened was, I sat down to talk to one of my Leadership Seacoast classmates, Jessica Parker. I'd learned that she went to Emerson, and I thought that would be enough of a creative hook to talk about the nonprofit that she works for. In my head, it was that simple, Emerson, so okay, fits with the podcast, blah, 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 vague transition, here's some stuff about an issue you should know about. Easy peasy, podcast over. That was the plan. Instead, the conversation led to all of this pondering that I'm doing about creativity and value. So, okay, what I want you to do is keep in your head some generic showbiz terms, knowing your audience, networking, juice cleanse, it's who you know. These are all very Entourage, the movie type phrases. They've got shallow and narcissistic connotations, right? Well, today, in a way, we're going to redeem those phrases a little bit. Except juice cleanse, I think that one's beyond redemption.
We're checking the stores around the Mission Church. For what? Statue of the Child Jesus. Do you have one we could look at?
Jessica Parker. You should say your own name.
Hi, I'm Jessica Parker.
Okay, so let's just start by talking about Emerson. Because, well, let me just give you, this is the normal path to Emerson, and tell me if this is true for you. You were, a creative person in high school, and you had a guidance counselor who was not particularly creative. And so they said, well, let's send them to the school where we send all of the creative people in the world, Emerson College. Was it about like that?
So I was creative. I was a band geek. So I was band, chorus, drama club, the whole
What'd you play in
yards. Flute.
I was going to guess.
It's pretty. I look like someone who plays
You look like a flautist.
right?
Yeah.
I actually, when I started looking at colleges, I thought I really wanted to be a radio DJ, and I actually met someone who was an anchor for Channel 9 News at the time, and she said, oh, well, I went to this other college, but if I had my way, I would have gone to Emerson. And so I just became singularly focused on going to Emerson. I only applied to go to schools in Boston, and I really only wanted to go to Emerson. And so as soon as I got accepted, I sent them my check and said, take all my money. So
Yeah.
all of it.
Their strategy works. then.
Yes.
So what was your experience like there? Did you feel like that was a good choice after you were singularly focused?
Yes. Well, I mean, it was interesting because, to go from a pretty rural, I went to a high school in New Hampshire that had 7 different towns, and my graduating class had 94 students. So it was very rural and very small, and to go to downtown Boston and be surrounded by my people, like people who were creative and into the arts, and and there were 2,500 students at this college that was literally in the middle of downtown Boston. So surrounded by so much culture, it was probably the best decision I made. It was an expensive decision, but it was a great decision. So the first fundraising job that I got, I believe it was probably about 7 years after I had graduated from Emerson, and I had had a slew of different jobs, none of which were in journalism, which is what my degree is in. But I went to apply for this fundraising job, and they said, well, this member of the committee said, you went to Emerson, you can do anything. That really was also the job that got me started down the path that I'm on now, doing fundraising. So, and it was quite a while after I got out of school. So for a while I was like, one of the things that sold the school to me was there's this huge network of alumni, and when you get out, you'll have this huge network of people to sort of pull from and to go, to network with. And I want to say that probably wasn't my experience right off the bat, but as I got into my career, I have met more people, and I have really sort of seen how that network has helped me in a different way from the way that I thought it was.
So this is very reassuring to hear, right? I mean, almost a decade later, I'm still wondering why my alumni network hasn't come and found me, but maybe I'm not looking in the right places. By the way, my most prominent contemporaries at BU were AOC and the Craigslist Killer, so I guess I'm glad that the latter never came and found me, but, my phone lines are open, Congresswoman. Now, let's talk about graduation speakers for a second before we go too far, because Emerson has a history of, great, famous graduation speakers. When my uncle graduated, it was Henry Winkler. A couple years after that, it was Samuel L. Jackson. Who spoke at your graduation?
Peter Bogdanovich. And I feel like he may not have been the first choice, and so forgive me if I'm wrong about that, but I can't imagine he was. It was not a great graduation speech, and so I graduated from college in 1998, and my family still regularly talks about the guy who spoke at my graduation and talked about sleeping with Sybil Shepherd lots and lots of times during my graduation speech. So it was definitely interesting.
I mean, it's a funny punchline to say Peter Bogdanovich spoke at my graduation. It sounds like a joke from a TV show. Like, it doesn't seem like that he would ever speak at someone's graduation.
I might have gotten the short end of the stick on that one, but
You know,
it's okay.
It's okay. I think graduation speakers are overrated.
I agree, because I don't remember anything about it. I just remember him talking about sleeping with Sybil Shepherd.
Just the one.
Just the one thing.
He knew that was the one thing he would
It was
remember.
very
He wanted to get in
inspirational.
there. Yeah. I mean, that probably was the goal of at least some of those Emerson graduates. So I looked around to see if I could find this graduation speech online, but astonishingly, no one has seen fit to upload it to YouTube. Instead, I ended up reading about Dorothy Stratton, a former Playboy playmate and a rising star that Bogdanovich cast in his movie They All Laughed. On set, a romance bloomed between them. Despite a pretty substantial age gap, Stratton was 18, Bogdanovich was 40, and it gets worse. See, Stratton was already married to another older man, Paul Snyder, who, in a jealous rage, shot her in the face, killing her and then killing himself. Bogdanovich stated afterwards that he and Stratton had plans to marry before her death, which is why it's more than a little weird that he married her younger sister, Louise Stratton, just a couple years later. There's more to the story, including a feud between Bogdanovich and Hugh Hefner that must have truly been the epic Freddy vs. Jason, Alien vs. Predator battle of the early 1980s, although it was more like Predator versus Predator. But we don't need to talk about all of that. There's enough Hollywood murder podcasts in the world. I just mention it here to point out that, all things considered, there are worse things Bogdanovich could have talked about up on that dais at Emerson. You mentioned already that at a certain point you got a job in fundraising, and that kind of sets you on the path. And I do think it's interesting that this person said you went to Emerson, you can do anything. And to think about the way that sort of creative skills translate in maybe unexpected ways. But let's talk a little bit more about that. You ended up in, what was your first fundraising job?
I applied for and got a job working at a local to me at the time. I was living in Maine, community mental health center, as the assistant development director. And so many of the tasks for the job, because I had never thought about going into fundraising, it was not something that was really on my radar. There was a lot of event planning involved with the position, and I was very skilled at doing event planning. So I started working there, I believe it was in 2006. So it was about 7 or 8 years after I graduated from college, and was the assistant development director there for 3 years. And really, I learned so much, and I learned that I was actually pretty good at fundraising and relationship building and development and doing all the things that you need to do. And so from that point on, I've really been working in either nonprofits or higher ed, doing some kind of event planning and or fundraising.
So when you talk about fundraising, is it primarily around like events? People come to the event, the ticket, it's like it's a couple $100 a plate kind of thing. I mean, because when I think about fundraising, like my first couple of jobs in college were like, cold calling people for memberships to various nonprofit organizations. What you're talking about, I think, is an order of magnitude above that.
Slightly. Although I did do that in college as well. When I worked at Emerson, I did the alumni phone drive one year. It paid very well, and it was in the evening, so it was nice.
Yeah, those are good campus jobs. Those are the best campus jobs.
No, there are a lot of different facets to fundraising. So you're right. You can do phone calling and cold calling. You can, there is an element to it. We do an annual appeal every year, so that's really writing letters and sending them out, calling people, following up with people. There's certainly the aspect that is the fundraising event, which lots of people do in different ways. It could be a golf tournament, a gala, an auction. There's all sorts of different, and sometimes people mix and match to suit
golf auction.
Needs. Yeah,
auction on a golf course.
I have done that. Yeah. I have done a golf tournament with an auction at it, so it was actually very successful, which is good. Really, fundraising and asking people to support your mission is, I would say, the most important thing is knowing your audience. So there are a lot of different ways that you could could say to somebody, what we're doing is important and we really need your support to continue to do the work that we're doing. The important thing for the fundraiser to know is how to connect with that person who can help them, because some people really don't want to go to a giant event and get dressed up in a tux, and some people don't like golf tournaments, and some people, would prefer to have a more personal touch than getting a letter in the mail. So there are a lot of nuances to what you're doing, but there are a lot of different ways you can ask people to support you. The most important thing is knowing the people who are supporting you and talking to them in the right way.
So if you were a rich benefactor, which type would you be? Golf or gala? Personally, I see myself as tuxedo gala type guy, but I actually think I might be on the cusp between the two types. Historically, I've always been terrified of golf. When I was a little kid, my friend Tad got a backswing to the face at a driving range. He ended up with this gnarly scar under his eye, and I never really forgot about it. But I'm allowing for the possibility that it's going to become one of those things that I become obsessed with in my mid-30s. You got to stay open to that kind of thing, I've always liked the clothes.
So let's talk about what you do now. Let's talk about Crossroads.
Sure.
Okay. What is Crossroads? Let's start there.
All right. So Crossroads House, we provide emergency and transitional shelter for single men, single women, and families from the Seacoast area, and that actually includes Strafford County, Rockingham County in New Hampshire, and Southern York County, Maine. So we have a pretty wide area that we're servicing and having people coming to us on any given day. Last year we provided shelter and services to 527 people, and that includes 31 families with 53 children. So we see a lot of people come through. Homelessness is generally something that a lot of people in this area may not see as an issue or as prevalent as it is. We live in a really beautiful area of New Hampshire and the country in general. And I think that, to an extent, sometimes people don't see the homelessness. And in a way, that probably means we're doing a good job of helping get people indoors and get them services, but it's also kind of a hidden problem.
Yeah, I would say, so my mother is a principal of a school, and I kind of learned from her that the idea of homelessness is not, this sounds very naive to say, this is not just like guy on the street living in a tent, whatever. There is a scale, basically, and there are children who are, by a legal definition, homeless, who may still, most of the time, have somewhere to stay, but it's a tenuous situation. Mm-hmm. How would you define homelessness? How would you what are some misconceptions you would like to correct about that?
So I think the biggest misconception you just mentioned is that it's a guy in a trench coat living in a tent, and homelessness really, the problem is so much larger than the misperception. Yeah. There are many, many people who are homeless, but you don't see them because they are staying with friends or family. They may be staying in a car. They may be very well hidden because they know that they need to be, because to some extent, sometimes homelessness can be criminalized and, tent cities are broken up or things, so I would say that people who are staying with friends and family, oftentimes people don't think about them as being homeless because technically they have a place to stay. Right. But that is not their place, and it's a very tenuous situation, and it really depends upon the generosity of another person to provide you with shelter when they are not legally obligated to do so. One of the things that I see and one of the things that I convey is I can't imagine how difficult it must be to not know where you're going to be staying at night. And to think that many of the people who come to stay at Crossroads House have gone through this sort of lengthy process of getting to us because we're a last resort. So what we really see is people who have lost what housing they had, stayed with family, stayed with friends, stayed with acquaintances, maybe stayed with people they didn't know, stayed in their car, stayed outdoors, and then finally get to us. But through that whole process, whether it's weeks, months, sometimes I have talked to people who went through this process over a couple of years or several years. Every day, those people woke up for all of those days and thought, their first thought is, I need to leave this place I'm in. And then their second thought is, where am I going to stay tonight? And they spend their whole day trying to figure that out. And it takes all of your energy and all of your time. You really can't focus on anything else to help yourself. And so you can't work and you can't, and some people do. I've talked to these amazing people that were living in their cars at rest areas, and then they would get up and run to the Y and take a shower because the Y will let you take a shower for free. And then they go into work, and then they get out and they get a microwave hot dog at the convenience store and go back to the place, the rest area where they're sleeping in their car. But you can only sustain things like that for so long. So I think that the misconception of that, the old guy in the trench coat, if we could erase any stigma around it, it would be that. We have families staying with us. We have 28 children staying at the shelter right now, last night. So of the 100 plus people that we are serving, a quarter of them are children right now that are staying there with their families.
So, by the way, no disrespect to dudes living in trench coats and tents. They are no less deserving of support. What we mean here is that this particular image of homelessness somehow manages to both oversimplify and overcomplicate the issue. It's oversimplifying because, as we've established, there are far more faces to homelessness than that one. And it overcomplicates because when people consider that image, they think about mental illness and Vietnam and addiction and other forces they have a hard time seeing themselves as a counterweight against. But most of the time, the issue is a lot simpler than that.
So in New Hampshire, we have one of the largest gaps between what you need to be making to afford to live in New Hampshire and what people are actually making.
Yeah.
Seeing that gap is really hard. So we have a lot of people who come in and they are actually working and sometimes working 2 or 3 jobs, but still couldn't afford an apartment because in New Hampshire you need to be making $21 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. And that's an average for the state, not the seacoast, which
Right,
is...
so it's even worse here.
Yes.
It's not hard to imagine families slipping down this particular increasingly steep slope. But once they arrive at Crossroads, they have a lot of tools and options at their disposal. How long do people normally stay at Crossroads?
So our average length of stay last year was 72 days. So that includes people who are staying for 1 day and people who are staying for longer.
Right.
All of our residents work with case managers. We have 2 full-time case managers, and then we also have case managers who provide post-shelter case management for people when they move out in their new homes to keep them on track. But the case managers will, when people first arrive, say, how did you get here and how do we get you back into housing?
Yeah.
So they are able to sort of guide our residents through the process of you need a photo ID or you need a copy of your birth certificate or you need your social security card. Here's where we go. Here's how we apply for those things. So they really provide a roadmap for people while they're there, and they help to guide people as quickly as possible through the shelter and through that process of getting back on their feet. At the same time, they're trying to make sure that they're providing the kind of assistance that's going to be helpful when people leave the shelter. So we want people to move out as quickly as possible, but with the correct tools, because our goal is for them to move into housing that's permanent and sustainable for them. Mm-hmm. So they'll work with them on budgeting. We have classes that we provide, Ready to Work, a class that sort of does nuts and bolts of finding and keeping a job, a rent-ready class, which again, that's nuts and bolts of finding and keeping a home. It's all team taught by some of our staff and by community volunteers who come in and provide their time, or community partners like Legal Aid, Housing. Wells Fargo helps to support our Ready to Work program. So we really have this great group of people who come in and help to provide those tools for people, so when they move out, they can say, oh, I remember I worked on this, or, oh, I do have a copy of my birth certificate, social security card, and a photo ID, so I can get a job. Because you can't do those things without those documents, and if you've stayed in 15 places, you've likely left a lot of things in a lot of different places, moving around so much. So we do try and implement things that are going to help our residents, that are going to shorten their length of stay, and that are going to provide them with some tools that will help them throughout the rest of their lives. That being said, we can provide all of these services. We have community partners who come in. Families First provides health care, dental care, substance use disorder care. Seacoast Mental Health Center is providing psychiatry and counseling services right on site. But the wall that we're bumping up against is that it is not affordable to find an apartment in the Seacoast area, and not just in Portsmouth. I mean, if even Dover, Rochester's getting very expensive. So we can do all of the things that we do to help people, but really what we are seeing the greatest need for right now is to be able to find affordable housing for our residents who are moving out of the shelter. The vacancy rate in the area, I believe, is less than 1%. It might be at 1%.
Yeah, it's like a fraction of a percent.
It's very small. So, for the 100 people that are applying for an apartment, one's getting it. It's difficult for our residents who maybe have an eviction or poor credit history to find someone who's able, not to find someone to give them a second or third chance. That's the current situation.
So for those keeping score at home then, not only is the lack of affordable housing a contributor to New Hampshire's rate of homelessness, but it's also a contributor to its persistence. All of the help that Crossroads and their partners provide isn't enough to overcome this obstacle. So the work that people like Sarah Reitzman are doing fits in very nicely with this whole struggle, which, by the way, I absolutely was not thinking about when I asked Jessica to talk to me. I really can't take any credit for the way this season of the podcast is locking together perfectly. It's happening on its own. Let's talk about what people need while they're at Crossroads, other than, obviously like the administrative stuff, like actually paying for the building and everything. What do you need the most? Where do you get furniture, food for people, somebody to cook the food, all of that? What's the
That is many questions in one.
Yeah, I know. I make that mistake a lot.
No, that's okay. We have, obviously, we have great needs because we're serving so many people with so many varying challenges. Mm-hmm. Some people arrive with just the shirt on their back. I remember I interviewed one of our residents, and he said, I arrived here and I had the clothes I was wearing and 85 cents in my pocket. And he just remembered exactly how much money he had in his pocket when he arrived at the shelter. And that was kind of remarkable to me to think that's all that he had. But some people arrive and they have a lot of stuff. They might have a car full of stuff, or, because they've been carrying their possessions around with them. But I would say the things that we need the most, and I think you sort of just hit the nail on the head a little bit, the thing that we need the most as an organization is definitely financial support. We receive only a third of our funding from government sources, so 2/3 of our funding comes from private donors.
I feel like fundraising for nonprofits gets a bad rap in a lot of circles. I'm thinking about the stuff that gets shared on Facebook about how much money the Red Cross spends on raising money. I am not a person who could critique or promote this line of thinking either way because, what do I know? I do not have a sophisticated sense of how nonprofits function. I mean, I've heard titles before, like Director of Development, but literally never connected that development means fundraising until halfway through my conversation with Jessica. But I will tell you that whenever my grandmother or whoever shares one of those graphics, my takeaway is always just, wow, it seems like those groups really need money. But if you're like me and you don't have any money, the good news is that Crossroads needs other stuff too.
So that being said, the other things that we need, we do have a wish list that's on our website, and we have an Amazon wish list, which is really easy. If you have Amazon Prime, you can literally check something off and just send it to the shelter, and you don't even have to get up and leave your desk.
Definitely putting a link to that in the info.
So But we generally need things like toiletries and sheets, twin-size sheets, and bath towels and face cloths are all huge items that we need all the time. We have people moving in and out quite a bit, so you can imagine those things. We go through them quite a lot, and they're
Just like a hotel.
right? And they get a lot of use, and so we do have a constant need to replace things like that. One of the things we get a lot of calls for, we get a couple of things. So furniture and clothing. In general, we do not take used furniture. We don't have places to store things. And so if someone has even if they have a beautiful couch, if we can connect someone right away and say, yes, we have a resident who's moving out today who can utilize that couch, then we can make that connection and see if we can help out. But we don't have a warehouse to keep used furniture. And used clothing we also generally do not accept, but we have Goodwill on one side of us,
right,
and Operation Blessing on the other side of us, and they both take those items, and then Operation Blessing works with people in the community to give those things back to people in need for free, so it's not resold, and our residents use them as a resource regularly. They're such a nice neighbor to have that we're able to refer our residents to them, and they can get some of their needs met there.
I just want to take a minute here to note that Jessica has mentioned several other nonprofits that work with Crossroads already, and more are going to come up in our conversation. She also told me that they have over 400 volunteers who do lots of things around the place, but most notably prepare dinner every night of the year. 23,000 meals last year. It's an incredible thing, and it's even more incredible to contemplate just how it all came together. What mix of luck and zoning put Crossroads between a Goodwill and a place that donates furniture to those in need? What kind of work went into gathering together those nonprofit and corporate partners to help people in so many ways? It takes effort, but it also takes creativity.
We started a partnership recently with Gather, which is the formerly Seacoast Family Food Pantry. It's the local food pantry, where our executive directors were talking about food waste and about, we live in a community where we are just so fortunate that local businesses are so generous, and we do receive a lot of food donations, as does Gather. But sometimes, at certain times of the year, we may receive so much butternut squash that we can't possibly cook it all off before it goes bad, because generally we get it when it's about to go, and we get a giant donation of it. And Gather usually gets similarly things like that as well. And so talking about that and saying, well, what could we do about that to reduce our food waste, to help more people in the community, to sort of make sure that butternut squash, if you will, is being used for its intended purpose, and started talking and came up with this collaboration. So volunteers from Gather and one day a week, some volunteers from Crossroads House as well are able to participate in this program. They are utilizing the kitchen at Crossroads House to take food that may otherwise become food waste, cook it into meals, and they're all very creative. One day they made kale egg roll pizza things. It was delicious. They are cooking these really creative meals, putting them into Go containers, and delivering them to people in the community who are food insecure. Now, we had the space. We have a chef, Chef Michael, who oversees our kitchen program, who could help to oversee the program. And Gather had a lot of volunteers, and we both had the food that we could utilize for this program. And so now they're using our kitchen twice a week to run this program. Our volunteers are participating. Their volunteers are participating. Crossroads House, I spoke with Chef, and he said we've cut our food waste by about 20%. Gather has said they're cutting their food waste by about 40%. They're preparing and delivering 300 meals to people in the community a week who otherwise would not have access to that food. So sometimes these collaborations come up because it's like, we have this exact need, you provide this exact service. And sometimes it's like, wow, we have this problem, how do we solve it? And it's really just about having relationships. And I think that I want to say my time in leadership Seacoast, this is what I've taken, is that everything is about the relationships that you have with people, and being able to know who to call to say either, I think I could help you, or maybe can you help me? And I think that that's really what I've taken away from the last 6 months. And I think that that's really what collaboration is about, and about what a lot of the nonprofits in this area do is how do we help each other? Because we're all in the same boat and we're all sort of trying to row in the same direction, which is to provide people in the community with a better life. So how do we do that together? And
this is like so deeply rehabilitating my feeling about like the idea of like it's who you know and relationships and everything. I think a couple of years ago when I was someone who didn't know a lot of people, wasn't good at introducing myself to people, was kind of always, I think because I knew a lot of like insider artist circles, I was always very like resentful of this idea, it's who you know. I always hated that phrase. I always hated the idea of networking because I felt like I was resentful of the idea that that's how it had to work.
I mean, I think I take it from a little bit of a different viewpoint, and, maybe it is about who you know, but it's about knowing resources too, and knowing your community. And I think that that's important. Some people, you'd be surprised at how many people come to Crossroads House and say, I've never been in here and I don't know what you do. Or come in and say, I didn't know you did all of the things that you do here, because we do a lot. And we have a very small staff, and a lot of the things that we do are really in large part due to, we have a great staff who does amazing work. We have great community partners who come in and help out with the services that our residents need to help get back on their feet. And then we have this amazing support from the community in general who come in to donate and volunteer and help us meet our mission year after year. To an extent, it's about who you know, but it's also about knowing who you are and knowing that this is my mission and this is what I do, and knowing that there are other people in the community who you can work with whose mission it is to do the things that you're not doing.
We checked religious stores out as far as Van Ness. We asked the same questions. The owners gave us the same answers, but none of them were as encouraging as Mr. Flavin. Frank and I had lunch and reported back to the office.
When I first moved to Portsmouth, I went to a lot of networking events, mostly encouraged by my father-in-law, Don. Most of them were these events where there'd be a cocktail hour and then some bullshitty TED Talk type presentations. And when Don was there with me, he'd introduce me to people and it all went great. But when he wasn't, I would stand there awkwardly, look at my phone, and basically just wait for the part where I could sit in the chair and listen to somebody talk about a thing. What kind of things did they talk about? I don't remember, because I was usually still shaking off the anxiety headache. Is that surprising to you? I seem extroverted to most people, and I am, sometimes. But never in situations like that. And now, looking back, I think I know why. Because 2012 Zach Little, standing there in those lobbies with a drink in his hand, didn't have anything to offer anyone. I had no idea what I wanted to do, or even that I had the ability to help other people. All I had was just raw creative energy, but it's like I was waiting for someone else to tell me how to use it.
It was 1:30 p.m. when we started.
If you have a good mission and you believe in your mission, it's not about me and it's not about knowing you. It's about the mission to help the people who are in greatest need, and the ability for you to be connected with that. And so networking and having connections is vitally important. I think when people hear networking, they think, it's just a bunch of people passing business cards, and really that's not what I'm doing, and that's not what a lot of people are doing. It's really learning about the community. You need to know your community. And, some people can live here for their whole lives and never know. And again, that's part of networking and throwing yourself out there and saying, what do you do? Here's what I do. And, wow, that's really interesting. How can we help each other?
So I have this aversion to the word mission that I've never fully unpacked. I don't know what it is. Whenever I hear someone say mission and it's not immediately followed by Impossible Ghost Protocol, I get a little queasy. If I had to guess what bugs me about the word, it's the way that it can sound sort of Jesus-y, but also very corporate at the same time, like the dreaded phrase, mission statement. But it's been bugging me that it bugs me, because I really like the idea behind it. Maybe I'll just call it purpose or direction or something. Whatever you want to call it, it's certainly the thing that I was lacking when I was wandering around all those networking events. And I still don't really know what my purpose or, what my mission is, But I feel like knowing that I don't have one and want one is a step up from where I was. And I do have an inkling of a purpose, or the beginning of maybe one of several. I feel like Leadership Seacoast was such a big leg up in terms of getting into that. And so one thing I'm trying to do with this show is for the people who listen to it who weren't in Leadership Seacoast. I mean, it's great that some people from Leadership Seacoast listen to it too, but the people that weren't in it and maybe don't live around here either, maybe who live somewhere else completely, where do they start? There are a lot of ways. If you work for a company that does a day of service, get involved in that, and while you're there, ask questions. Don't just get the weed whacker and do the lawn care. Also, find out about why you're there and what's happening. And if your company has committees, join the committees. If you don't, if you work for like a restaurant or something, I don't know, just go look and see what else is on the street. If there is any food waste generated by the restaurant that you work at, find out what happens to it. I mean, maybe I guess the hardest part is asking questions.
Yeah, and actually, I think you hit on it a little earlier too. The hardest part is asking questions and asking for help.
Yeah.
And I want to say, I feel like I'm plugging a lot of nonprofits today. But a great place to start if you are looking for volunteer opportunities or ways to get involved is your local United Way will likely have a volunteer headquarters that you can go to online and put in your interests, and they'll ask some information, and it may give you some opportunities that in the community for you to get involved.
Yeah, that website's great. It works really well. And it asks you about your interests, and then you get like a weekly digest normally in your email about different volunteer opportunities. Signing up is super easy. It's very cool.
And if you want to get involved in an organization and you work for a company and your company's not doing days of service, talk to someone in HR, set something up. You can be the person who starts the action. There's always a person. You can be a force for change in your organization, in your home, in your community. You just need to take that first step. And that first step might be going to your HR department and saying, I think we should do a day of service. It could be you go home and you say to your kids or your spouse or what have you, or your roommates, you know what, we're going to go shopping and collect items from this organization's wish list. It could be that you're in school and you decide to do a blanket and towel drive for Crossroads House. We have a lot of people who do things like that. But it really just starts with one person making the decision that they want to help and then taking that next step to figure out how they can help. One of the things that you can do to be a force for change in the community is learning about the organizations in the community and then talking with your friends about them, because maybe you don't have 2 hours to go cook a meal, and maybe you aren't able to do a sheet and towel drive because you work from home by yourself. There could be a lot of reasons that you may have that you aren't able to do what you feel you need to do to make a change. But really, change starts by just talking to people and telling them about your community and about the organizations in your community and the good work that they're doing, because then you're letting other people know how they can help as well. And it does spread, and people hear and they think, oh, wow, I'd really like to help out with that. And it is important to be able to say, oh, I went on a tour of this nonprofit and I feel like they really are doing great work with helping the homeless, and you should definitely go check it out. And then, and being able to just do that and helping to point more people in the direction of helping out the local nonprofit sector is vitally important. So
you never know what talking to somebody else, what that's going to spark in their brain. I mean, case in point, you and I were talking about something else at Margaritas and started talking about Emerson, and in my head I thought, I know about this idea that I'm trying to convey with the podcast, and I'm always looking for some creative route in, basically. And I was like, well, there's my in, and I knew where you work, and I thought, okay, I know I can build something out of this, and it just started from whatever bullshit we were talking about after Leadership Seacoast one day. And that's happening all the time. And anybody who listens to this podcast or another one of the episodes that we've talked about this kind of thing, who then goes and tells somebody else something that they learned about it, you don't know what they're going to do and where they're going to take that ball and run with it, or a piece of that ball, to be more specific. But yeah, it's cool to think about.
Well, and I think the other thing to keep in mind is you never know who you're talking to.
Yeah.
And this is something that I see in my daily work because our front desk is open and staffed 24/7, 365. And our front desk staff has people coming in who are dropping off, socks and underwear and towels and sheets and donating and dropping off cash donations or checks, or maybe dropping off food donations, or maybe coming in to volunteer, or maybe coming in and looking for help because they're homeless. Mm-hmm. And you can't tell who's who when you cannot tell who's who when people are coming into the shelter. And I have sat at the front desk before and helped out. I have had the front desk call me and say, someone's down here and they said they have a check for you, but I'm not sure. And you just never know who's coming through the door because homelessness could happen to anyone. Mm-hmm. And the people who help us are your neighbors. And so there's no face of homelessness. There's no face of a donor or a volunteer. We're all people, and we're all just trying to help each other out. Treat everyone with respect and dignity, regardless of what you think their circumstances might be. And I think that's something I definitely, that we definitely, as an organization and I as a person, subscribe to. But you really don't ever know who you're talking to. And I think it's like when you and I started talking, I didn't know you, and now like, oh, Zach's a great guy. But it's just taking that leap to have a conversation with somebody and to talk to somebody and to treat someone with respect and dignity, and then to get that back in return and learn something new about other people and about yourself. And that's what life's all about.
Well, there you have it. There's your marching orders, people. I think that's a good note to end on. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me too.
Thank you.
So I've been working on this episode, which is in part about rehabilitating my relationship with networking events, and as luck would have it, just moments ago, I got invited to another networking event. The invite to this one said, I would just like to add to the public record. It said, we have identified you as a vital part of the Seacoast creative community. And when I read that phrase, I was like, fucking finally. It's about time you people found me. Okay, to be honest, I wasn't exactly found. I was actually invited to this event by my new friend, Catherine Stewart, who you're going to meet next week on the podcast. But guess how I met Catherine? I was following Jessica's advice. I met her, I heard about some work that she does, and I said, I think I can help you. So, I'm going to try and keep following Jessica's advice. I'm going to go to this fucking networking thing. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to try to minimize my awkwardness while accepting that there's at least going to be some awkwardness. And I'm going to keep in mind that it's not about who you know for the sake of who you know. It's about who you know for the sake of who you can help and who else you might be able to help together. I want to help people. And it's occurring to me now that my platform and my creative abilities are really and truly a way that I can help, a way that I can have value. It's still not necessarily a monetary value, but it's one that can be measured in more meaningful ways than likes and retweets. I still like the likes and the retweets and the podcast reviews, of course. I think this is a revelation that's been coming for some time, but it really crystallized in the aftermath of my conversation with Jessica. For the last 2 years or so, as documented on this show, I've been learning to reach out in a lot of ways. I've been trying to escape the prison of my own mind and meet people and learn things. And now I'm learning to reach out more specifically. I'm learning to say, I think I can help you, and really mean it, and feel good about the truth of it, the value of it. And if you're listening to this, I want you to know that I don't mean for you to just be a spectator to this process. You're a part of it. We're going to keep talking to creative people, trying to make a difference, and I want you to think about how you can help them. That's what this show is now. I mean, not always. We're still going to talk about bright eyes and movies and that kind of thing sometimes. I'm staying open to wherever this show threatens to take me, always. But this is where it's taking me right now.
No, don't say anything.
I recently finally changed this show's description on Apple Podcasts. It used to say something about being a postmodern-ish field recordings-based podcast. Whatever the fuck that means. Here's what it is now. The Last Podcast is a show that used to be about how to be a better creative person, that's now about how to be a better creative person. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Jessica Parker. Thank you, Morgan Little. Thank you, Levon Helm. We'll be back soon.
The story you have just heard is true. The names and locations were changed.